Hello everyone and welcome to round 4 of our August 2v2 tournament. This time we finally have Blues and Death Tacticus in our matches, and once again we're looking at Dubin and Steph. So Dubin and Steph, if they're going to make a comeback, now is the time. They've really got to win all 3 games to have a chance of, even a remote chance of winning this tournament. Things are going to have to pan out very, very well for them from here on out. But if there's a time to make a comeback, well, now's the time to do it. Blues and DT, on the other hand, they've got a solid lead, and they will be looking to secure it further as we move through these last 3 rounds. So, DT this time, he is going to choose to go for a scavenger, whereas Steph, once again, electing to take an expansive location for steal. So we've got a double scavenger against double expansive. And from my 1v1 experiences, typically, I much prefer to be the scavenger over the expansive player. The quick access to black market can be used so effectively, especially with tools like new claims and EMPs available. So we'll have to see how things move forward in this particular game. Blues and DT both already HQ level 2. No big surprise there. Once again, plenty of carbon production from DT to sustain Blues, and it does look like he's also taken just a little bit of silicon. Gonna start that production. Will allow him to secure easy glass production later in the game. Definitely a good idea considering our colonies began the game with 5 warehouses this time. Well, Dubin's caught up, got into that HQ level 2 himself. I am a little bit concerned about the aluminum production for Dubin and Steph. Kind of an odd situation in 2v2 when your iron and your aluminum that you'd like to take is all right next to each other, because typically you just want that one player to focus on it. A bit of a complicated thing you can do is have one player just take iron and aluminum and have the other player be the one to completely focus on steel. You have to be able to coordinate that very well, but I think if you're going to do it, this is the sort of time when it perhaps should have happened, was have one player secure maybe double iron and then double aluminum, and then potentially start producing another resource besides steel, and have the other player make sure I am just going to take all the steel in the world and get like 7 steel mills going, and it's going to be brilliant. So I'm a little bit nervous about where Steph and Dubin stand when it comes to steel and aluminum production at this point. You can see they are distinctly lagging behind in upgrades. It's just to be expected, I think, with Scavenger up against Expansive, but you can't fall too far behind, otherwise the black market could start coming in and really, really ruining your day. Steph has gotten to 3 at this point. He is going to be grabbing a little bit of steel. Might even still be good at this point to see Steph move into... See, what I potentially would have liked to see is Steph go ahead and take a double aluminum, maybe with a high and a medium, and that would allow Dubin to transition into maybe some solar panels. Instead, we are just going to see geothermal production out of Steph here, which is also just fine. Geothermal production, very, very strong when you are playing expansive, as long as you have plenty of steel available. But as you can see, this is when things are starting to get really nerve-wracking. Blues all the way up at 4. Dubin still back on 2. So effectively a 2 headquarter lead right now for our scavenger combo. Our expansives, they're going to have to be doing something tricky to catch back up in here. Going to have to be watching for if there's a gap somewhere that DT and Blues aren't finding that they can fit into. Food maybe almost could have been one of those gaps, but Blues is starting to fill it now with these farms coming down. Power still looking pretty solid for Blues. He's going to be making plenty of money off of that with his triple wind turbines, which are very heavily goon squatted. No adrenaline boost this game, but Blues has pretty well made sure that if an EMP lands, things are going to be okay. You can also see a bit of the mind games, it looks like, coming through here, where Blues, rather than defending here on this particular very strong tile, he is assuming that his opponent is going to assume that the very strong tile is defended, and so he chooses to defend the other 2 tiles. This is the kind of thing that'll happen once you get strong opponents who you kind of, you know how they expect, what moves you expect to make, what moves you expect them to make, and so the mind games kind of start to come through a little bit on exactly what's defended and what's not. Blue's committing even further into power. Probably saw just these geotherms up. With the dynamite available and spies available, I wouldn't be too surprised to see our scavengers focusing very, very heavily on keeping these geotherms knocked down to allow this fantastic power production to keep coming out of Blues. Blues can't decide exactly how much he wants to commit to it, which is never a good thing, but you can see that nonetheless he is making a large amount of money from it for the time being, and this has allowed Blues to already push up to HQ level 5, so maintaining, and perhaps even you could consider increasing that 2 HQ advantage, as Blues just has so many options for things he can do on HQ 5. Alright, more dynamite raining down. This time it is going to be against Death Tacticus. His elemental quarry is all that's going to be hit. Bit of an interesting choice there. However, that was of course making a fairly significant amount of money. Might have been better to hit this wind turbine, but once again, it is expected that these are going to be defended, and in particular the very strong tile is the one you expect to be defended the most. Well, Blues now feels confident in going after that majority buyout, and things are looking pretty bad for Dubin and Steph now. DT and Blues, they feel like they've got enough upgrades that they can perhaps finish up this game, and Dubin, he does have the cash to defend himself. But even if that's done, things still wouldn't be looking pleasant. I do find this interesting. So Dubin doesn't fully defend himself. Instead, you see that Blues DT, they've backed out a little bit, seeing that Dubin can defend himself. Chosen to go after an upgrade. This gives Dubin potentially the opportunity to upgrade as well. He's going to take that risk, go after that upgrade, and start to try and make this transition. Just try and hold on at this point, however, is all that he can do. And now Blues and DT, after they took that upgrade, looks like they might be switching into an attack on Steph. No big surprise there. Steph's still quite vulnerable. You do have to defend both players. And this is one of those big advantages to getting an advantage in a 2v2, right? You go after one player. The opponents commit their stock to defending that player. And suddenly you can turn around and just attack the other player. Force them to commit the money to defending that player as well. And you could kind of just keep forcing this. Both teams could obviously keep selling out of stock, buying into stock, selling out of stock, buying into stock to defend one player at a time. But it just focuses the other team. It just forces them to focus, right? They have to commit time and energy to making sure they're paying attention to who's being threatened and who's not at any given moment. Or they have to commit a lot of cash to just defending themselves permanently by having as much stock secured as they can. So either way, being able to get aggressive is an additional tax on your opponent. And so it's a good thing to see out of Blues and DT. And might help explain how they've been being successful if they can always get off to this quick start that allows them that solid advantage over their opponents. Well, 2 level 5 scavengers this game. We haven't seen a move yet into Offworlds. I would expect we won't actually see one unless Dubin and Steph both are able to completely defend themselves and we start to see a serious push into the late game. That's when we might see an Offworld. And if we do, I would expect the Offworlds to come over into Blues' corner, as Blues is the one going after thinking machines for the time being. This is kind of a nice way you can focus things right now. You can see that DT, he's going after pleasure domes. That's his late game tool that he's committing to. Blues is more committing toward the off-world markets by going ahead and moving into that patent lab. You can see an optimization center is also coming down out of Blues.
An expansive HQ has been upgraded.
So things should stay looking pretty good for our scavenger players here. That said, Dubin and Steph, they're starting to pull back into things. They've got HQ 4 each. Their opponents can't keep upgrading their headquarters at this point. And Dubin and Steph, of course, they are far more rewarded for being able to upgrade, as they do get so many more tiles. So as long as the on-world prices can hold on, perhaps Dubin and Steph can still make something happen here. Glass is looking pretty nice right now. Silicon, though, is also extremely expensive, so maybe a bit more silicon quarries coming down. You can see that out of Steph right now after his upgrade. DT, though, you can see that plan for slant drilling coming out. He's going to want to move into that next so that he can make sure that he has the best silicon on the map. No underground nukes available this game to keep that shut down. Best you could possibly do is perhaps dynamite it out or magnetic storm the silicon as it's flying across the sky temporarily while you try and pull in enough to knock the price down yourself. Hack array auction going on over to Blues. A bit surprising, I would say. Although Blues is no longer really pulling in cash from power. So perhaps a bit acceptable that he's going to take on a little bit of debt now. This keeps DT's debt from getting too high and keeps him from potentially spiraling out. So it's nice to see that once you've kind of decided power is no longer a resource you need to worry about, you start spreading that debt out a bit more evenly by having Blues go ahead and take that auction. Thinking Machines is done, and we have an immediate transition into the Offworld market out of Blues. I might expect to see another one, but it might not happen as well. Glass and electronics are both quite expensive, so the Offworld market just would be a bit pricey to put down. There is a nice convenient location for it, potentially instead of this electronics factory. I'm a bit surprised at how Blues has done this layout. Maybe it's just at the optimization center he plans to keep around permanently. He could transition this water pump, this electronics factory, into an Offworld later if he feels the need. DT and Blues both going to just go ahead and defend themselves for the time being. It looks like they're feeling pretty confident in the late game, but they wanted to make sure that Dubin and Steph didn't get too crafty and start committing their larger stockpile over toward Blues before the game was went ahead and secured in Blues and DT's favor. So just going to buy enough stock for the time being to make sure they're okay. You can see that Blues is definitely planning on the Offworld market in this location, but it's taken him a long time to push to. Just glass and electronics, both very, very expensive. So it's just taken him a while to get that market secured. We can see the market now that we actually have it online. Going to be pulling in about 44,000 a minute for Blues with that nice oxygen launch. I would expect his optimization centers to be pushed. Yeah, you can see maybe oxygen, glass, maybe electronics for Blues is what we're going to be looking at, whereas DT looks like our primary glass producer, so I'd expect from him silicon and glass, whereas Blues, he's going to be going after probably Kim's electronics and oxygen is maybe what we're going to see out of Blues. Let's go ahead and check here. Yeah, you can see quite a lot of silicon and glass, and DT, of course, pulling in an absolutely ridiculous amount of silicon at this point with slant drilling. That might be the nail in Steph and Dubin's coffin. You can see that they haven't gotten to HQ5 yet. That glass cost is just so insane that it's been prohibitively expensive for them to get to the upgrade. Instead, we have seen Offworld markets coming down from those two players. Dubin's got one secured, Steph headed into one himself. But with on-world prices still so valuable, I don't think the quick transition into the Offworld is going to quite do it. So you can see that the launches are going to start coming through from Blues, which is going to be absolutely fantastic. He's got a second Offworld coming online now. So it is just going to be, when all is said and done, 2 Offworlds to 2 Offworlds, but HQ level 5 with patents and upgrades for one team. The other team still stuck on 4. Never got to push to 5. And very, very limited, not useful upgrades realistically available for Steph. So things are looking pretty grim for Steph and Dubin at this point. Blues and DT kind of putting on a clinic on how to just keep getting more ahead. Once you're ahead, there was no overcommitment to the aggression. The aggression was very measured, very intentional of, we are going to slow you down by forcing you to defend yourself. And because you've committed all this cash to defense instead of investment, we're going to turn around, sell out a bit, keep investing ourselves, and just continue to push through to the late game very, very easily. Dynamite continues to land occasionally. It looks like it's mostly focused against those optimization centers. Blues could be majority bought out at this point, but he is just going to go ahead and defend himself. That's what we would expect to see. And then Blues should be able to pretty easily take down Dubin in just a minute here, perhaps sell out of some of these chemicals this glass and these electronics will give him enough cash to go ahead and clean up Dubin. From there, it should be a fairly simple and straightforward process to bring down Steph. So you can see our expansive players, they were able to hold on for a while, but this is always my concern about that double expansive. It just takes so long for you to ramp into those late game bonuses that it's often, I don't think, worth it. You can see these players never fully benefited from their expansive quality, never managed to get to HQ level 5. Blues finishes bringing down Dubin, and I expect we will very quickly see Steph brought down to finish out this game. Just continual oxygen launches, a bit unfortunate. Coming out of Blues might be a bit more valuable to have switched into something else momentarily, as oxygen's price has gotten quite high. See, maybe not quite enough on the oxygen upgrades. Probably no point in going for this third upgrade here with chemicals so expensive, but not the end of the world either way. The win is very, very easily secured. We can see Blues and DT once again showing that they do deserve their current top spot. That's 4 rounds on over to them after this one, with a nice win once again over Dubin and Steph.